Okay, welcome to the 29th episode of An Evolving Man. Today, I'm really excited to be speaking to Michael Maisey. Michael is the author of the best-selling book, Young Offender. He has been sober for 14 years, and since his release from prison in 2001, he has been on a journey practicing healing and self-development on himself to improve his life and heal the wounds from his own childhood. He went from a child from an underprivileged background with zero qualifications to being in a position to retire at the age of 35. He works with all the tools he has found to be most beneficial. He brings these tools together to help others reach their full potential and help them to step up and let their own light shine. His core belief is about 100% accountability, giving back, and transforming the lives of others from all walks of life. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you. Thank you, Piers. Thanks for having me, and blessings to you, mate, for having this platform and, using it to reach people. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Grateful to be here.
Yeah. So as I was sharing before we began, I was speaking to Rod Boothroyd probably a month ago. I said, is there anyone you'd really recommend speaking to? And he says, speak to Michael Maisey. I'm like, I've not heard of him. So I think that day I emailed you.
Yeah.
And you...
Mate, credit to Rod, like his book is like a Bible to me in the work I do. I didn't have a great education growing up. So I was trying to understand the archetypes by Carl Jung. And I would just get lost in Carl Jung's writings. And then Rod's book come out and I was like, oh my God, this like breaks it down in a way for my mind to understand it. So I bought I can't remember. I bought a load of copies anyway, and a load of signed copies off him. And I did literally distribute them at my workshops to the men that I work with, because it's a roadmap, and I think that's a missing piece for me. When I was growing up, there was no roadmap. There wasn't even a man to give me the roadmap. Yeah. And if there was a man, he didn't have a roadmap. So for me, I guess in this moment, I want to honor Rod for introducing us, and also for taking all the time he took to do his own work and then put that work together for other people. That book has empowered me to help a lot of other men.
Thank you. Yeah, I kind of resonate so much. I feel same with my upbringing, that I had no idea what it was to be a man. I just had boys teaching me. And so coming across Robert Moore's work originally, and then Rod Boothroyd's, it was like, oh yeah, this is what it is to be a man, a king, a warrior, magician, and a lover. So yeah.
Because your stuff was boarding school, wasn't it? I've done a little bit of listening to some of your stuff. So I work with a lot of guys from boarding school, and it's like there's a lot of wounds there around them guys, a lot of abandonment wounds as well.
Yeah. I think it's just a fascinating subject, and the more I delve into it, the more I realize that, a lot of our leaders, the 30% of the government, 60% of all judges, boarding school, the head of, I think, MI6, I think even Cressida Dick, the head of the police, they're all ex-boarders. And, so, I think it's Joy Shavrin says the ABCD of boarding school syndrome: abandonment, bereavement. They call it homesickness, but actually you just don't see your family, and C, captivity. You can't escape from this place. And then D is dissociation. And I kind of, when I was reading your book over the last week, you spoke about that dissociation. So how I'd love to begin is really talk a little bit about your journey, because it's a real roller coaster. I couldn't believe, reading that.
Yeah, thanks, man. And I think, just like really quickly on that point you made, and I think it's great that you're doing this work, because you're uniquely qualified with this, helping boarders, right? But that's such an important point, is like the people in power are all ex-boarders, and they experience in their childhood this lack of connection. You know what I mean? And here they are now in positions of power. And we wonder why, as a nation, we're so disconnected from each other, from ourselves, from Mother Earth. And it's like, here you go. That could be the missing piece of the puzzle, is that the people in power actually disconnected themselves. and they've been disconnected from a very young age because of being in boarding school. It's just highlighting the wound for me, and I think I couldn't skip that and talk about my story without talking about that. It was too much of an important piece to not cover.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I could speak for hours about this, and yeah, and I'd also love to hear, you know, how you've got into the work you're now doing, because you're doing fantastic work, going into prisons, companies, working with men, women, healing wounds. I'd love you to share some of your journey.
So it was my own pain, Piers. That's what it was. You know, like my mum come from a big gypsy family called the Mohans, originally from County Mayo in Ireland, and they spread all across mainly the north of Ireland, in Northern Ireland and other parts like, you know, Dublin and all them sort of lower counties. And my mum came here to England. She immigrated. She was an immigrant, and she met my father, who was like a violent, unpredictable alcoholic drug addict. And my mum was an alcoholic. My dad left before I was 1. So I was raised by my mum. And growing up, there was a lot of trauma. There was physical abuse, sexual abuse, there was neglect. There was days I wouldn't eat. There was days I'd wake up and like all the adults would be asleep, and they wouldn't get out of bed till like midday, and I'd just be wandering around in my nappy. You know, like that was my life growing up. And I made this decision. It was like a subconscious decision, like looking back in hindsight at a young age. It really happened after I was sexually abused by my uncle. And the decision was, this world isn't a friendly place. If this is what the people you live with do to you, then what is the world going to be like outside? And when you're faced with that dilemma at the age of like 5, 6 years old, like you have to think up of a survival strategy. How am I going to survive in this hostile world? Like that was my judgment of it, that this world is hostile. All adults are dangerous. And the technique I created was, I'm going to be loud, angry, unpredictable, scary, intimidating. So if you were an adult, a teacher, a social worker, anyone like that, and you met me, the label you would have put on me was probably like, now we've got actual stuff for it, like BPD, borderline personality disorder, ADHD, all this stuff, right? But really that was my strategy to keep myself safe, because if you were scared or intimidated of me and you didn't want to be around me, that was my plan working to perfection, because if you didn't want to be around me, that equals safety for me. You know, and I chased this right through my early years, and then I found safety. Really, the only safety I really found was in the ranks of my local gang. You know, I call it a gang. We were just a group of kids from a council estate in London. But that was where I felt safety. Like we were a group of kids, all a bit messed up, all from broken homes. Some of us had immigrant parents. Most of the fathers were missing. And that's where I felt safe for the first time in my life. The problem though with that is like we were all lost young men. Like we didn't really know what we were doing. We didn't really know how to live. We had no idea of how to process emotions. And we looked at our elder kids in our community for that. And they were like drug dealers committing crime in and out of prison. So naturally we just followed in their path. You know, it was like, this is part of the process. And so I went to prison. I got convicted of armed robbery and possession of firearms at the age of 15. And then shortly after went to prison, and spent most of my teenage years locked in a cell. Like the solution that the system had for me then, this young traumatized kid, was let's lock him up for 23 hours a day. And that's how I spent most of my teenage years. And then right at the end of my time, just before my 19th birthday, I was like, I desperately wanted to change, but I couldn't see any way out. And I looked around me, and, you know, my mum was an alcoholic. My dad was a heroin addict. He was like just like a rock bottom case. And I was just like, you know, excuse my language, but my mindset at the time was like, I'm fucked. I've got nothing. Like, how am I going to get out of this? I've got no qualifications, I've got no one I can lean on. And that was a moment I was like, I'm going to kill myself. And I was in my prison cell. I wrapped up my bed sheet, turned it into a rope, and then wrapped it one end around my neck and then run around one end around the top of the bars and hung myself. You know, and it was funny, Piers, because like I was so desperate to die. I was so desperate. I was like, I just want this to stop. I just want to die. I just want out of here. But as soon as you realize that the noose is tightened and there's no escaping, like you just want it to stop. It's like an instant regret. It's like instant. It was like within the first like less than a second, it was like boom, straight away you're trying to rip it off. And then, you know, I just slowly realized, like, you know, I had this desire to be better than the men that went before me in my family history. But as I was hanging there, it was like, you're not going to be. You're not going to be any better than your father or anyone who went before you. You're just going to go die and be remembered as the alcoholic, drug addict, criminal, just like all your uncles, your father, your grandfather, just like all of them. You know, and I remember like I blacked out, I lost consciousness. And then the next thing I remember is I was laying down and I could see like a bright light, and it was a light on the ceiling of my prison cell, and two prison officers were arguing about, you know, just they were having this argument, who was meant to check him, and they done CPR on me. Once I come back around, they carried me by my wrists and my ankles, and they basically tossed me in a padded cell on the floor. And that was my emotional rock bottom. Like I laid there in the fetal position on this padded floor, padded cell, everything was padded, just crying. And it was like this mask that I had on for the first 18 years of my life suddenly just melted away. And what was left was this 5-year-old boy who was abandoned by his father, whose mum was an alcoholic, who was sexually abused by his uncle, who was intimidated and beaten by his stepfather. That's who was there. It was this little 5-year-old boy who just wanted love. And that was my emotional rock bottom. And, you know, I remember they kept me in that padded cell for about a week or 2 weeks. I can't really remember. And I had this determination. I was like, I don't know how the fuck I'm going to do this. I don't know how I'm going to change my life, but I am going to change my life. I am going to do better. And that was it. You know, it was like this moment. I got released from prison. I went to an AA meeting, which was like a real moment for me, where I was like, you've really messed up your life, man. Like, you're 19 and you're at an AA meeting, like all the bad places I'd been in my life. But in my mind, it was like the worst place to be on a Friday night was at this AA meeting in Ashford. And you know, I just wasn't ready. I just wasn't ready for it. You know, everyone was really old to me. But I was like, I'm going to try some other ways. I'm going to try controlling my drinking, and I'm going to try learning this and reading this book. And I'd make 1 step forward, 2 steps back. Eventually, the age of 25, I was like, I just got to get sober. And that was it. It was tough because everyone in my community was drinking, taking drugs. Loads of people like, you ain't an alcoholic. You don't drink you're not sleeping on a park bench. But I knew within me, I was like, if I'm serious about this, if I'm really going to change my life, then you have to get sober. Because I just fast forwarded the videotape. I looked where my dad ended up and I looked where my mum ended up. And I was like, statistically, you're going to end up there if you carry down this road. And that was it. I got sober at the age of 25. I've been sober ever since. I've been sober 14 years now. And that's where the growth started happening. Real rapid growth of like, I started applying everything I've learned. I carried on learning, attending workshops, seminars, reading books. Like, in some ways, Piers, looking back, I became addicted to self-development. That was like my new addiction. It was like, I just want to learn. It was like I was just, you know, swallowing every bit of new information. And then getting to this point, you know, like really I got to this, I'd always done prison service, going into prisons, helping others. And I'd always, you know, help people, but really then getting to this point where I was like, in 2017, okay, I really need to create a proper format here and combine everything I've learned and put it into something and see if actually this is going to reach the people that I believe we need to reach. Because I attended a lot of organizations. It cost quite a lot of money to take part in their retreats. And I was like, I knew loads of people that could do with them workshops, but they ain't got the money. So I was like, if I could eliminate the money problem, and I'd done that at that stage in my life, I was financially secure. If I can eliminate the money problem and give this work to the people who really need it, and I think we all need it, but I think there's some people who really need it, right? Then we'll do it. So I started off, I live in Devon, I got 10 acres of land, and I'd done my first workshop on my land in Devon, in my back garden. And I know, man. And it just sort of carried on from there. You know, I want to shout out to a couple of guys who helped me in the early days. You know, Rob Barker, he's an MKP man. Tim Hall, he's an MKP man. Tim Hall was a massive inspiration for me in stepping up, letting my light shine. Watching him do the shadow work pieces, really good guy, Tim. We ain't spoken a while.
I met him at Menfest a couple of years ago.
Yeah,
he was there, and then they moved from Glastonbury Menfest down to the Blacktown Hills last year, actually.
That's right. Yeah, Menfest is just round the corner from me.
Okay.
Just literally right round the corner from me. So literally like 5 minutes from my house. So we done that, and then it got to a point where it was growing so quickly. Some of the neighbours started complaining because I would have guys coming straight out of prison, ex-military guys returning from Iraq, like coming down my driveway, walking into my garden, and some of the neighbours were like, "Who's all these bloody massive guys with tattoos? Who are these?" And they was like, "Look, you know this, you know, we're not really comfortable with all these men coming in and out." So I was like, I went to the parish council and I said to the parish council, "Look, I need some help. Like, if you don't want this here, these men need the help." And then a local farmer come to me and said, you know, like, "I've read your book and I know what you're trying to do is good. And I just want to give you a plot of land." So he gave me a 25-acre plot of land with a lake. And he was like, "That's yours. Just use it." No, didn't want any rent or anything. He was like, "Just help, just keep doing this work." And that's why I believe, like, you know, my creator, I'm not religious, but I refer to God as my creator. All of this had to happen, you know, like, and these things, these little things that come along in my path are little signs that you're on the right path. Just keep going. Yeah. And so that's it. You know, the CIP project, which is the organization that I set up, has been going now formally since 2018. And we run workshops in schools, prisons, colleges for members of the public. And yeah, you know, for me, it's all about being of service, doing my work on myself, being of service to others, and training other people to step up and be leaders. And having, like, you know, we got a face-to-face check-in group that runs once a fortnight. We got weekly groups that run every week on Zoom, separate group for men, separate group for women. We do corporate workshops, prison workshops, school workshops, you know, and it's about really using the lived experience to help other people who are going through it, because I believe that's more valuable than something you can learn out of a textbook. People don't really want to hear about the guy who's graduated from Oxford or Cambridge. They want to hear about the guy who's really fucked his life up and he's found a way through all that pain. And so that's what I do. I try and empower them men to step up, and really been pushing the last 12 months, really empowering people of color to step up and be of service to their communities, because that was one of the biggest things I faced in especially in the prison work that I do. I'm a white man going into a prison and running a workshop that 95% of the participants are black. And it's like, yeah, we need to empower some black brothers, some Asian brothers, and get really diverse here. So we got a good group of guys now we're training up. and you know, we're going to streamline it, and you know, it's just a beginning. You know, I'm 40 this year. I reckon I've got another 40 years of this. So it's just a beginning. We're just growing now. So yeah.
Wow, beautiful, beautiful. Thank you for doing this work. It's so needed. Wow, 40. Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks, man. Didn't think I'd make it to 40.
No, I think I was similar in my 20s. But then I think one of my suicide attempts was, I just got a sense, oh no, you're going to live till you're 90, Piers. I'm like, no, fucking hell, I don't want to live till I'm 90. I want to die now. But yeah, I'm still going. So 20 years later.
Yeah. And grateful for that, mate. Grateful for that. We wouldn't be talking now, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I really love what you say about using lived experience. I think sometimes, you know, I remember, and that was something you mentioned in the book about towards the end when you trained as a therapist and you were then sharing your journey with your clients, and those in power are going, oh, you can't share that. And I totally agree. I think, you know, when I'm working with people, I share my experiences at boarding school.
Yeah.
What went on. Yeah. Because it makes us almost human.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. People don't relate to the guy who's got all the answers and got it figured out. You know, and that's really apparent. Like so for instance, I go into a prison. So I want the inmates to get honest and vulnerable, which is something that goes completely against the grain of what happens in a prison system. Yeah. So if I want that from them, well, I better bloody model that first. Yeah. You know what I mean? So I start my check-ins with like, okay, I'm going to check in first. I'm going to model what it looks like to get honest and vulnerable. I'm really fucking terrified. I'm terrified that you lot ain't going to listen to me. I'm terrified for the group is mainly black guys, and you're probably thinking, who the fuck is this white guy in here trying to preach to us? I'm afraid you won't get this. I'm afraid I'm going to be made to look stupid and I'm going to look like a fool. Really modeling that raw, honest vulnerability gives permission for them to be honest and vulnerable, you know? And that was why when I trained as a therapist, that's why I left, you know, like I was like volunteering at this place in Kingston. And ironically, I'm doing a TED talk in Kingston in April. Wow. But I volunteered in this place and they loved me. The clients loved me because I was just open and honest, you know, like about my life and how I was a drug addict and a heroin addict and I was suicidal, and they loved that about me. And I remember when I got pulled into an office and almost like given like sort of a verbal disciplinary or something like that. And I was like, can't you see what's happening out there? Can't you see like they're coming and they're opening up to me about stuff they're not even talking to you about, and you've been working with them for like 2 years? And they was like, you can't do it. If you want to be a therapist, you have to have this professional relationship where you don't let them into any of that. And that was it for me. You know, I left that day. I was like, I can't be a therapist. It just drew a clear line under it for me. And you know, I've had therapy over the years, and I think it's definitely a very useful, beneficial tool. You know, but I've got judgments around that as well. Is therapists have to earn a living, and I don't know if they're truly invested in completely fixing you, or whether they're more invested in you returning and paying their bills. You know, and I'm not saying that's the case for every therapist, but it's in my judgment, it's become a bit of a culture amongst the therapeutic world, and I'm much more invested in workshops, self-development workshops, group work. I think, you know, like for instance, when I attended MKP, the New Warrior Training Adventure, I would say that was more like 2 years of therapy in one weekend. I swear it was, Piers, mate. Yeah. You know, like we uncovered and unpackaged so much that weekend, as hard and tough as it was. Like I left, I was like, bloody hell, I've been sitting across the room from a therapist for like 2 years. We didn't even get close to any of this. So, yeah, I just have a lot more faith in shadow work. There's some great shadow workers out there, but I think there's a lot of power in group, in it, doing it in groups in front of our brothers, looking at seeing other men do their work. There's so much power in that. And healing. There's a lot of healing. I've had so much healing attending workshops and sitting in MKPI groups, watching other men's work. I'm like, it's healing something in my soul, just watching it.
Yeah. Thank you. While I was doing Menfest last year, we did a circle. There was 20 of us doing a boarding school one, and it was 3 minutes per man to share. And within a couple of men, I shared my story of my friend while I was at boarding school jumping in front of a train and what that was like. And I was in tears. And, as we went around the circle, everyone started to connect to their emotions. And this is us as ex-boarders would show no emotions. And it was so powerful that, like you say, it's like group. And Nick Duffel, who was kind of one of the godfathers of this movement of boarding school syndrome, says, yeah, group work, because then we realize we're not alone. That, I'm not the only one. Because as men, we're like, I'm fine. And then we can hear someone else share, and it's like, oh my God, they went through the same horrific stuff that I did.
That's what I mean, mate. You see, like that lived experience you've got. That's what we need. We need to come together, because diversity is what is going to get us through this stuff. So, for instance, when I go to a prison, it's in the south of England, it's like 90% black. So really, I need a black brother here to my side to share his experience. But when I go into the corporate world, yeah, it might be 70% white and 30% black. Yeah. And out of that 70% white, 30% of them might be boarders.
Yeah.
So you see, like, I need you there. And I need the black brother there. And I need the Asian brother there. So it's like, we need diversity amongst the facilitators. And that's one of the issues I'm trying to fix amongst a world of self-development is in my experience, it's mostly middle-class white men. There's not many men with my experience out there helping people. Most people have, once they've made it, they want to just disappear into the shadows. They don't want the world knowing about their shady background, right? And it's like, now we got to pull you guys back out of the shadows. You got a responsibility now to pull others up. And with that responsibility comes a burden. And the burden is to keep doing your own personal work. So when you're rocking up to helping others, you're like, your cup is full. So there's so much to be said about it, man. And, I'd welcome bringing you in with me on some of these corporate things, especially the ones up in the city. And we done one yesterday in Bristol, because what you shared there, about the jumping in front of a train, I mean, it's like, wow. Wow. Like it touched me, man. I and I know this is your podcast, man, but I felt like I want to just pause and I just want to let that land, like, and just honor that you're here and that you're sharing that. I just want to honor that and respect you for that, for being brave enough to talk about that, and it's like, when you look back at your life and you think about all the mistakes that you think in your head they were mistakes. And then when you look at like where you are now, in this moment right now, sharing this story right now, maybe none of that was a mistake. Maybe it was all meant to be. All of this stuff was meant to be. All the pain, which sort of loops back to the beginning, when you asked me about what led me into this work, and I said pain.
Yeah.
It's like pain is like, there's gold in that, if you're willing to share it.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. And if I can support your work in any way, please give me a call. That was my background before I had my breakdown. Was I trained in international business and I worked in Paris and London in the city. And then I had a bit of a meltdown, kind of not homeless, but I left my partner, but I didn't have anywhere to go to. So it was like, okay, I should have thought this one out a bit better, but I wouldn't be here if I hadn't made that step. So yeah, if I can support So I'd love kind of going back into your story, this idea, and we've spoken a little bit about it, the importance of eldership. That, there's a few instances in your book that you talk about, age 12, you kind of, the guy who's living next door, Jake, and you mentioned again, looking up to these older people, the older boys on the estate, and what were they doing, the drink and the drugs, is what would the impact have been for you as a 12-year-old if you'd had someone like you in the community going, come on guys, we're going to go out and do, I don't know, war games in the woods or whatever it might be. But I'd love you to share a little bit about how that was missing and how that would have been to actually have had that.
Well, the story around this, around how before colonialism, basically, and they were native tribes all around the world, and they had a thing called a rite of passage, where they took boy and taught him what it means to be a man. There was even stuff like this for the women as well, where elder women took them through and they were initiated into some sort of role, sometimes to be a medicine woman, and it's like we went over, we raped and pillaged these countries and smashed these traditions to bits. And a lot of this work is like, it's about reindigenization. Is like, how do we get back to these traditions that we tore apart and smashed to bits? And I think, in the absence of any traditions and any rite of passage, I believe in our soul, there's something that's calling us to that. And when it's not there, we just look for it and we latch on to what we think is safety, because that's really what this is I want to know that on my journey through being a man, I'm going to be held and nurtured. And in that being held and nurtured is a sense of safety. And I achieved that sense of safety by attaching myself to elder kids. They were tough. They knew how to fight. They knew how to survive in the streets. For me, it was like, there's safety there. They can guide me and mentor me through this world. The sad thing is that they were guided and mentored by lost young men who had no dads and who hadn't been initiated or done a rite of passage. So it was like the blind leading the blind. None of us knew what we were doing. We lived in the dark, but we didn't even know that we lived in the dark. So we didn't know what we didn't know. Like, we were completely lost. You know what I mean? And then this is what a lot of this is about, is like going back to these communities. And that's why I've always gone back to prisons. I flew out to Belfast a couple of weeks ago and went to a young offenders called Hydebank prison, because these are the guys who really need it. And they're in the dark and they don't even know they're in the dark, and they really need this work and they don't even know that they need this work. Like, you go to a workshop and they'll be sitting there laughing, thinking, yeah, I'm just here to get out of myself for a bit. Like, they don't even know how much they need what they're about to hear until I start talking. I think, this is the hard and arduous task of what we're trying to pioneer now. This is what I'm trying to pioneer, is like, how do we put a value on lived experience when all of our systems of employment put value on a qualification you get from university, when actually a qualification from university does the opposite when you're working in the field of social care or the criminal justice system. We need to take these reformed ex-convicts, ex-people who struggle with mental health, and bring them back in and pay them money to help pull up the next generation. So there's so much to be said. Like, everything needs upgrading, Piers. The education system, the criminal justice system, the way we treat ex-military veterans, sending them off to fight wars for some corrupt agenda. There's a great awakening taking place right now, and I believe you have to choose what side are you on. And if you're choosing to sit down and watch a show and just watch how it unfolds, I'd believe, in my judgment, you're on the wrong side. I think if you've got some life experience and you've managed to find a way through, you need to fucking step up now, because we're at a crisis point in our history. The planet is messed up. We've had COVID. Suicide has increased up to 200% since lockdowns. Like, you know, if you found a way out of your darkness, I don't care whether it's only you've made it out a little bit, you need to reach back now and start pulling people up and continue doing your personal work. You know, find organizations like a Band of Brothers, Women in Power, the Mankind Project, Clear Mind International, even my organization, the CIP Project. Like, go and do your personal work. If money's an issue, find an organization like mine. We offer free bursary places. Like, there's no excuse for you to not work on yourself now, you know, but you have to be part of the side that are working towards creating a better world. That's what side you have to be on. We create a better world by creating better humans. So you can be a better human by just going and working on yourself. That's how we create a better world. So yeah, I think elders, you know, to come back to your point, sorry, I went on a bit of a rant there, Piers, but elders are crucial. You know, like, also in my book, I speak about a guy called Sean. Sean was my sponsor in AA who helped me get sober. I was in Belfast a couple of weeks ago celebrating his 50-year sobriety birthday.
Really?
You know, and, you know, here's a guy in Belfast, completely unknown to the world, but he is being of service to men in prison, outside of prison, and he's just giving back. He's stepping up. He's on the side of, like, making this world a better place, you know? And you know, here's a man who, I was in Belfast at the time. I had a skinhead. I was a loud, arrogant Cockney getting sober in Northern Ireland. And he was a Catholic Irish man. And he saw past all my bullshit and was like, he's just a kid, a lost kid who needs help. And he's asking for it in all the wrong ways. And he was brave enough to challenge me. And I think a lot of what young men need, and I speak for myself as well, is like, we need that challenge. Like, we need to be challenged, you know, and people shy away from that, you know, like, oh man, it's a bit too intense. And I think, you know, bits of the, I want to be careful what I say here, but, you know, there's bits of certain self-development weekends that can be a bit of a stretch, a bit of a challenge, but that's exactly what we need. These rites of passage, these initiations, it's meant to stretch you. It's meant to be a challenge. But it's like when you're growing up and you have growing pains, that's all that this is. It's growing pains, you know, and we need it. We need our elders to look us dead in the eye and challenge us. And challenge us not only on our behavior, but also on, why aren't you stepping up and letting your light shine? You've been in this field of self-development for 5 years now. You got some gifts you need to give away. Why aren't you out there giving away your gifts? What within you is telling you that you're not good enough to step up and let your light shine? Let's get that out. Let's explore that. You know, so elders are vital. They're vital in our development. And I've been lucky enough to meet some amazing men, you know, and two of them real MKP guys. You know, Tim Hall is one of them. Real guy, really pushed me into stepping up and letting my light shine. And my mentor, Anthony Eldridge Rogers, he's also an author and he's got his own project as well, Jump, Fall or Fly. You know, Anthony Eldridge Rogers has been that guy who's just gently nudged me. You know, like we spoke about the golden thread, and the golden thread goes from the day you're born to the day you die. And it's about your legacy you're going to leave in this world. And whenever I get too far away from the golden thread, he'll be like, whoa, come back, get back on track, get on the golden thread. What is your mission in this world? My mission is I inspire men and women to be the best version of themselves by using all the tools that I have to hand. Okay, how close are you to that? Oh, fuck, well, yeah, okay. And then it's like that gentle nudge of an elder saying, get back on track. And that's the role that the dads would have played.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And, you know, I can't even be angry with the missing fathers. You know, look at the world and what's happened. You know, we had the Industrial Revolution. What did it do? It took all the men out of the house and stuck them in factories. And then we had World War I. We lost loads of fathers there. So you had loads of sons growing up without fathers. Then you had World War II. You had another new generation of men growing up without fathers. And here we are now. We're left trying to pick up the pieces. you know? So it's like people like myself and people who are stepping into that position of service, is like your role is also to them fatherless sons. It's like, we need you to step up for them. So if you grew up without a father, you knew what that was like, how painful that was, how difficult it was, all them moments where you just wanted your dad to put his arm around your shoulder and tell you it's going to be okay. Yeah, you can be that man for someone else, you know. And that's why, you know, I'll give a shout out to a band of brothers. You know, they're doing some fantastic work, you know, very similar to ours. They're doing stuff in the prison system, you know. And I think it's about collaboration, you know, bringing organizations, resources, people together. And it's like, look, there's enough pain in this world that we can share all of this stuff, you know. And if we come together and work together, I believe that's where the solution is in collaboration.
Thank you. Thank you for mentioning a band of brothers. I've got Michael Boyle, one of the founders of the band of brothers, coming on next week.
Oh, amazing.
So yeah, I've got a friend who runs the Manchester group for a band of brothers. And I've always been, I've kind of always had this link with teenagers. So I've looked at setting up a chapter for Journeyman, but I'm also a scout leader. So that takes up quite a lot of time. But I see that, yeah, such powerful work, just being there.
Yeah, that's it, man. I was up at the Bristol I group, what was it, a couple of weeks ago, and I saw they've got a set up there for Band of Brothers. They shared a space with MKP and a Band of Brothers, and it's a really great space in Bristol that they've got there. Nigel Newell is one of the elders there, and he was really good, welcome me in, you know. And it's great, man. I mean, this is a thing, is like using our platforms to signpost people. You know, people are going to listen to this because they've read my book, right? And it's like, okay, how many signposts can I give to people that if they don't want to do MKP, they might do a Band of Brothers. If they don't want to do that, they can do this. Women in Power. If you're a woman, you can do Women in Power. If not, you can go Clearmind. If not, you can go, if your money's a problem, come to us. You know, and it's like, could you imagine if every celebrity, and I'm not classing myself as a celebrity, but if every person with a big platform used it to signpost people towards resources that would help them be a better human being, what sort of world we'd live in? You know, instead of signposting them to some, you know, excuse my French, bullshit product that they should buy that's going to make them feel happy for 5 minutes. You know, like, yeah, I won't I've got a lot of judgments around that. I won't go into it, but you know, you know, I think it's using our platforms, which I judge you to be a man that's using your platform in the right way, bringing together men and people who are doing good in the world.
Thank you, brother. Yeah. So moving kind of on, and it's kind of still interlinked. When I was reading your book, there was a couple of instances where I was like, it's that first time you got arrested. And I think the policeman came into your room, your mum had invited him in, and he sat down and spoke to you. And the way he did it, I can't remember what the words were, whether it was quite condescending. And then also later on, the superintendent, when you first got arrested for armed robbery and you were in the prison cell and he came in, and each time he said they did it in a way which didn't really work. And the question I had as I read that was like, what would have helped you in that moment?
Yeah. And that's it. You know, is sitting there from a place not of judgment, or not that I know what's right here and I'm going to tell you what you need to do. Is just saying, talk to me about your life. And I think even before that, you need someone with lived experience to say, look, let me tell you about my life. I was an ex-convict. I was suicidal. I was a drug addict. And now I'm doing this. So you build that trust first by displaying honesty and vulnerability and your lived experience, which then gives them permission to open up. Talk to me about your life. And if people get stuck, this is one of the techniques that I use when I run workshops in prison, is if people get stuck, I use the 4 gateway emotions that we use from the archetypes: sadness, anger, fear, and joy. You know, and a good one that normally gets people to drop into it is like, talk to me about your sadness. Tell me about it. Let me into it. And then it's like, if someone had asked me that, I'd have been like, fuck, I'm sad. My dad chose heroin over me. I'm sad that my mum chooses alcohol over me. I'm sad that no one was there to protect me while my Uncle Tommy sexually abused me over and over again. You know, like, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. It's like, I got so much to say on my sadness. You know what I mean? And I think, but it's emotional intelligence, and we're like kindergarten kids in when it comes to emotional intelligence. We're so ill-equipped. And that's like the work I do in schools and colleges. It's just emotional intelligence. That's all it is. It's like, I'm just teaching you how to explore these difficult emotions within yourself so you can be comfortable in them, you know, because we're a human being, and a human being has a full range of human emotions. And how good a human being you are is that I'm able to feel them emotions in all their different levels of intensity without using alcohol and drugs to numb them. So I just need to get you more comfortable in talking about your sadness. Let the group into your sadness. Let us into your anger. What anger have you suppressed? And if you want to let it out here. It's better it comes out here than to some poor guy on the street. Let me into your fear. What are you afraid of? What are you really afraid of? And then often the most difficult one for young people, and especially men in prison, is talk to me about your joy. When have you experienced true joy? You know, because we have our heads that we're always looking for the negative. It's like, actually, what makes you happy? Tell me about the happiness. You know, I've seen more men cry over that part than the sadness. It's like, fuck, actually, I've got some good stuff in my life. Fuck, when I really think about it, my mum's always been there for me, or my brother's always, you know, like, when you think about it, the joy is there as well. And it's like, how comfortable can we get in exploring all these emotions within you? Because the more comfortable you get in that, the less likely it is when you go out into the world, when you experience a difficult emotion, you're not either going to act it out on someone else, or you're going to take a drink or a drug to numb it. So, yeah, I think like there's so much to be said on this, Piers, but you know, the conversation is much deeper than one conversation as well. You know, like if that chief superintendent come in, and this is one of the biggest problems we have in the criminal justice system and in the education system and the corporate world, is like people want you to come in and fix everyone in a day. It's like, no, that's not how this works. Even for me, it's like self-development is a lifetime, and it's not a journey with an end destination. You know, like it's just a journey. There's no destination. You're never going to arrive. It's just a journey. Yeah. So it's like, if that chief superintendent come in, it was like, this is one conversation we're going to have. And then I'm open to having another conversation and another one, but I'm going to be there, and I'm going to be consistent. I'm going to show you consistency, even though your father never showed you consistency and your mother never showed you consistency. I'm going to show up when I said that I'm going to show up. You know, and that was one of the most powerful lessons I learned from MKP, was around the accountability in doing what you said you were going to do. You know, and I never underestimate the power of that, because I grew up in a world where mum and dad said loads of stuff and never done it. And it fucking hurt every time. My mum would say, I'll be right back, son. And I'd sit staring out the living room window waiting for her to come home, and waited until it got dark, and putting my younger siblings to bed. And she'd come home at all hours of the morning, pissed out of her face. And that would happen all the time. And that inconsistency caused so much pain in my heart that years later, when I first met my wife, she would go out with her friends and I'd have this pain in my heart. And I never knew why. And I had to go away and explore it. It's like, because every time my mum said she'd be right back, she never come back. So when you go out with your friends, I'm fucking terrified you're going to meet someone else or do something and you're going to abandon me, just like my mum did again and again. You know, so consistency is a big thing. It's a real underrated thing. And I think you get there through accountability. That's what I believe. The gateway to consistency is accountability. Being challenged by your brothers, being held to account, setting a goal or committing to something and then being held accountable to it. You know, I've got a few friends of mine who we're accountability brothers. We set goals, we set yearly goals, monthly goals. And it's like, Mike, what about that goal you've set? Is this a wishy-washy thing or are you committed to this? Well, what the fuck are you doing about it? It's the 25th of the month. You ain't done nothing towards that. You need to get your ass in gear. And it's like, thank you. As hard as that is to hear, thank you for bringing that gift to me. You know, so yeah, in some ways, and it's knowing when to challenge a man at a certain point in his life, but in some ways we've become quite soft, you know, because we're so used to being challenged in a real negative way and being judged. And it's like, no, I'm not judging you. I'm challenging you because I love you and I care about you. I'm willing to upset you if it means you become a better person. I love you that much that I'm willing for you to be upset with me if it means at some point in the future you're going to be a better man for you and your family and your wife. And it's like, wow, you fucking love me that much. Wow. You know, like, it's incredible, man.
Yeah. Thank you. As you're speaking, I was listening to your interview on, I think is it High Crimes or True Crimes, from a podcast from 2-3 years ago. And on it, you're talking about anger. So as you were speaking about those 4 emotions, you mentioned being on the SAS Who Dares Wins TV show and being asked to get into your anger, you know, seeing the red mist. And a question which came to me is like, oh, how did you manage to not get drawn in and go into that old space? What, you know, and I think you mentioned you teach this to the children, you know, the young men in the prisons.
That's right. And that was what stopped me going into it, was thanks to, you know, my mentor, Anthony Eldridge Rogers, who taught me about the golden thread. And he was like, is there anything, because I was invited onto that TV show. I didn't want to go onto it, you know, but I spoke to Anthony and I spoke to my sponsor in Ireland and I was like, I'm not sure about it. And they was like, well, what better place to show people that you can have your history and you can change, you know, like you can have someone like Ant Middleton screaming in your face and you can show the world, actually, look, I am a convicted violent criminal, but I've changed and I'm going to show you that I've changed, because when you're screaming at me, I'm not going to retaliate. So I decided to go on it, and I knew that the fighting part would always be a difficult thing for me. And what Anthony said to me was about the golden thread is like, they might ask you at times to do things that you don't want to do, that aren't in alignment with who you are today. And I want you to know that you don't have to do it, you know? And so when the fighting came, they paired me up with a guy who'd been bullied, who in my judgment had a lot of suppressed anger, unprocessed anger. And he was a barrister and I was an ex-convicted armed robber. So it was a spicy mix, you know? But I knew I'm not willing to go to that, which I would judge to be the inflated warrior. I'm not willing to become an inflated warrior for your TV show, for your entertainment, to entertain your audience. I'm not willing to do that to myself, you know, because my mission in this world is bigger than this TV show. And so as the punches started coming in, he realized Michael ain't really in this. And I wasn't in it. I was like ducking and weaving, you know, I was trying to block some shots, but I weren't throwing any punches. And he started going, like throwing haymakers, like really, really. And he knocked me down. And I remember this moment when he knocked me down. It was like that part of myself going, it's time for me. Let me fucking out. Let me out. It's time. This is my time to shine. This is my time to shine. Come on, let me out. And my sovereign, my king, was going, remember the golden thread. Remember why you're here. You're here to show people that change is possible, that you can go through the life you went through. And even when you're knocked down, even when you're humiliated on national television, that your purpose in this world is bigger than that. It's to show people that you can change. And I got back up, and that was a big moment for me, having been knocked down. And Ant Middleton said to me, go again. And the punches started coming again. And it's like this tussle between my king and my inflated warrior. And I took the punches, and then I got knocked down again. And that was it. The fight stopped, and I went away, and I felt this pride, you know. And Ant Middleton made some comment that was pathetic, number 11. That was shit. Really put me down. But in my heart, I was like, you don't know how much strength it took me over the years to not be that guy that loses his shit. That took me years and years of self-development and working on myself to control that beast that used to run wild around the streets of London. And it was like after the fighting, they decided they were going to send someone home, and boom, they sent me home, And I think for me, it was like, as sad as it was, it showed me how much I changed. Because as soon as I arrived on that TV show, the lead director, Ant Middleton, was going for me the whole time, trying to intimidate me, trigger me in front of the cameras. Every time he'd do it, the cameras were right there. There was 2 cameras in my face. And I think they looked at me as a token ex-convict armed robber. They was like, keep pushing that guy's buttons because he's going to explode. And this is going to make great television, seeing him try and knock you out. And I didn't, and I think once they realized we're not going to get this out of him, and they realized that pretty soon, about halfway through the process, they were like, just send him home. We ain't going to get the entertainment value we expected from this guy. And that was it. I went home, and it was funny because I felt like this sense of pride of wow, I've really changed, because since I got sober, I hadn't had a physical altercation. I hadn't tested that part of myself to know, right, how many punches can you take to the face before you turn into that lunatic you used to be? And it was like, yeah, I could take a lot before that comes out, and it just gave me faith in the work. It was like, this is the power of the work. It's like, if you're really invested in changing, you can go from a violent, convicted armed robber, who spent time in prison for assaulting a police officer. I spent time in prison for attempted murder. It was like, yeah, that was me. I was that guy. And because of the work that I've done through organizations like Mankind Project, I've changed. But that's the power of this work, and that's what it showed for me. That TV show was like, there you go, Michael. There's your proof. Yeah. The work you've done has worked.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I heard when you mentioned, I think Ant Middleton tweeted saying, the week, something about the week going now. And I'm like, yeah, that for me, what it's like you say, the inflated or the deflated warrior, rather than actually the warrior's there to serve a greater purpose. I wouldn't say that's weak, but that's just me.
Yeah, that's right. He tweeted the week ahead of the episode airing, the weak shall perish. And of course, that episode was all about the fighting and me going home. And it was like this moment on a public stage where loads of people supported that tweet. And it was like this real tussle of like, fuck, my inflated warrior going, you messed up, Michael. You should have let me shine. That was my moment to shine. Yeah. And it was like, nah, it's like I had to. It was so hard because, that TV show got over 1 million views of British public. And it was like holding on to myself in the middle of it and remembering, no, your purpose, Michael, is bigger than this TV show. Don't focus on now or the next year or so while people are paying attention to this.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, remember, you've got another 30, 40 years of this, of work helping others.
Mm-hmm.
And in time, people will see your journey,
Mm-hmm.
your whole journey. And this is just one chapter of that journey, you know? And so it was like in the middle of it, trusting myself, and also trusting my creator. You know, I'm not deeply religious, you know, but, you know, I know that I'm not the source of creation. Something created me.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe I call that source my creator, and my creator has got a bigger plan for me, you know, and I just trust that,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that like the journey ain't done yet. I've got a lot more years left, and people who watch this journey will see, you know, this world will be a better place when I leave. I will be remembered for making a positive impact on the people that I meet. I will be. I know I will. I've done it already. But I will be remembered for making this world a better place. That's what people will say to me. That'll be mentioned in my eulogy when I die, is that he done all he could to make this world a better place.
Thank you for the work that you are doing. It's very inspiring to read your story and go, oh my God. And to hear more today, what you have been doing with people. So how are you doing time-wise, energy-wise?
Yeah, I'm great, man. I feel like, we're just flowing.
Okay, good. Yeah, I'm enjoying the conversation.
Yeah, me too.
So, I think the next thing I'd love to explore is just around addictions. I mean, a lot of the people I work with, or certainly in say the boarding school world, struggle with addictions. Different things, but alcohol, drugs, also things like workaholism. I'd love for you to just explore a little bit now. From reading your book, it was such an intense journey of giving up alcohol and drugs. What really helped you? What were the things that, almost like you mentioned reaching rock bottom in the prison. And I remember in the book, you also mentioned when your mum came in to see you, you were like, okay, I've reached the lowest of the low here. I wonder if you could just share a little bit about, okay, what did I learn and what can I pass on to others who are struggling with addictions in order to help them?
Yeah. Well, alcohol and drugs worked. I wanted to escape, and they helped me escape from the pain I was feeling, So where was the source of the pain? The source of the pain was a little boy who had no one. So there was no connection. There was no dad there to protect him from his abuser. There was no mum there. So that pain, that lack of connection led me to seeking connection in other places that I could judge that they were more consistent. And alcohol and drugs done that. They guaranteed that I would feel differently, so I could escape from this feeling, this pain. And they were consistent because I could go to a shop anywhere, steal it or buy it, So for me, it was like this consistency and this ability to escape, and you would think like getting sober from alcohol and drugs, my desire to escape would end. In fact, it was the opposite. In fact, it ignited something in me of like, I want to escape more, and I went into eating, sugar, internet pornography, having sex with loads of women, making loads of money, being successful in like the corporate world, which got me somewhere actually, because I'm now using that money to help others. But in the process of doing it, I was escaping from the pain, and I believe that the opposite of addiction is connection, and when you think of the archetype of the lover, it's all about connection, reconnecting with that little boy in me. It's like, how often am I in communication with him? So some of the processes that I do are around mirror work. Like that's what I do on my workshops, is like taking them to that place where they can connect with that little boy, and then really looking in the mirror and having a conversation. What do you need? What do you really need to hear that you never heard? And then extracting that and then writing it down. Being like, I love you. I'm there for you. I really got your back. I honor you for getting through everything that you went through. I see so much fucking strength in you. You are amazing. You're incredible. Like really connecting with myself. That's for me is like, the more connected I am to that, to my pain and my little boy inside and myself, the less chance of me going and seeking connection somewhere else. You know, connection, you have to have connection with people you love and with friends and with people you support. But when it starts going in the territory of alcohol, drugs, sex, gambling, sugar, food, success, whatever it is, social media now, there's another addiction younger generation got to deal with, and even people like myself, to be fair. That's when you got to go, right, what is this giving me that I'm not giving myself? You know, so it's like learning how to give yourself what it is, potentially what you would have needed from your ideal parent, your ideal father or mother. Is like, okay, they couldn't give that to you, but you're an adult, you can give that to you. What is it that boy really needs? That love, that guidance, that being held, being supported, you know, giving that to myself and then showing that to the woman that I love. You know, that was like a big thing for me. It's like, I would always present to women this polished, clean version of myself, you know, and it was like, that's not what true connection is. I'm showing them like the sales rep of who Michael is. This is a sales representative. He's doing a sales pitch. When actually behind the sales rep is this broken, sad, lonely boy who desperate for real connection, something much more sacred than just sex. He wants something much more deeper. And it's like, I get there with, you know, I met Sasha back in, we've been together, crikey, almost 12 years now. And, you know, she's like an angel. I married this woman who was brave enough to challenge my way of thinking, which is quite incredible, really, you know, because she come from a very like well-to-do background, and she got with a guy who was an ex-convict, right? But there was something within her, this strength, that she was able to challenge me and say, what's really going on here? Like, why are you trying to run from me? I know you love me. Why are you running? And the pain of that, of being fuck, you know, and going away and exploring that, you know. I'm running because every person growing up hurt me. And I'm worried if I love you and I trust you, you're going to do to me what every other person done to me when I was a kid. So when we have moments of connection and intimacy where I should feel really happy and joyful, I'm sitting here shitting myself. I'm terrified you're going to break my heart like everyone else did growing up. And her hearing that from me was like, wow, fuck. I thought you just weren't attracted to me anymore. It's like, no, I'm so attracted to you. I love you so much that I couldn't bear the fact if you hurt me or rejected me, my heart would break into a million pieces. So it's safer for me to just run. And in the middle of that, it was like, wow, there's connection. I'm bringing all of me, not the polished, perfect version of me. I'm bringing the messed up, messy version of me. And she still loved me. In fact, she loved me more. It was so refreshing for her. And it started this process in our relationship where it's like, bring that messy, tearful, snotty version of yourself as often as you can, because that's the real you. And in the middle of that, we experience a thing called intimacy. You know, intimacy is very closely linked to connection. I often think prior years ago, I thought intimacy was sex. When in fact, it's just, when you break that word down, intimacy, into me see, letting you see into me. All the darkness, all the skeletons in my closet, all the pain, all my fears, all my sadness, and all the things that bring me joy, letting you see all of it in the hope that you don't reject me. And then when I experience you not rejecting me and you're loving me and you're welcoming that part of me, it's like, okay, it's safe for that boy to come out and play. He's welcome here too. And that's intimacy, connection. You know, so yeah, connection is another thing that's just, there's just not enough emphasis put on these things. There's not enough conversations happening about these things. They should be part of mainstream education.
Yeah. I can't quite understand why we don't have a class on relationships or intimacy. You know, you might get an afternoon or a class on sex. I don't think I got that at school. So it's like, I feel it should be like a regular class. Yeah, you know, and not just from a teacher, but someone actually who's experienced it.
Yeah, totally, mate. This is it. And I think, again, it comes down to the lived experience, you know, like sharing the whole story of like, okay, this is the price I paid for not doing intimacy well. I had lots of failed relationships and had sex with multiple women, and all of them failed. And I ended up feeling really crap. Mm-hmm. That's the price I paid. If you're experiencing that, then this might be the solution. We're going to educate you on intimacy and connection. You know, and this is where it's like going in and teaching children, saying, oh, I've read this in this book, that this is how you do this. It's like, we don't want to hear that. I want to hear the whole story. It's like, you know, like I want to hear the whole thing, because that's what I'll relate to. That's what I can attach tangible results to. It's like, oh, I've been where you've been. Oh, and this is where you're trying to take me. I get it now.
It's interesting. I heard a story of someone saying recently about Einstein. This lady came to Einstein once with this, her son. She wanted him to be brilliant. So she said to him, what should I do? What maths problems? He says, just tell him stories. And she says, no, you don't understand. I want him to be a genius like you. What maths, you know, there's specific algorithms or things that I should do. And he says, well, tell him even more stories. And yeah, we think knowledge is important, but actually it's, you know, stories. And, you know, we would have had our ancestors sat around a fire telling us stories. That's how we learn, you know. And I feel like you said, that's how we still learn. But how many teachers are brave enough to share, this is what's happened to me.
And that's it comes back to that point, Piers, around the re-indigenization of our people. Is like what you said. We used to sit around campfires, and we'd sit around a campfire in a circle. You would know the power of sitting in circle yourself. You know, we sit in circle because it means everyone's voice is equal. It's not a boardroom where you put the important people at the front and the less important people at the back. Now, everyone in this circle is important as the next man. That's why we sit in circle. And when we sit in circle, we respect each other's sharing time. We don't talk over each other. We don't try and fix each other. You know, we share our knowledge, our stories, like what you said. You know, it's like, how have we become so removed from that? You know, sitting in our central heated homes, you know, watching Netflix. You know, it's like, and no disrespect to Netflix, you know, because they might be commissioning something that we're airing soon, but you know, like it's highlighting like sitting at home thinking we're comfortable when actually we're not comfortable. Comfort is sitting around the fire with men, honestly sharing wisdom, you know. And that's what we do. Like, it's a big part of the weekends that we do. You'll often see men posting pictures of sitting around the fire. We spend a lot of time around the fire. We keep the fire lit the whole weekend. It's not allowed to go out, you know, and that's what we do. We sit around fire, constantly around the fire, you know, sharing stories, you know, talking about our elders, talking about experience of what it means to be a man. You know, like when do you really have that conversation? Let's check in around what you think it means to be a man.
Yeah. Wow. I was brought in to Scouts a few years ago. We did do this thing on a weekend away. They call it Scout Zone, where we do some more reflective stuff. And I brought in the archetypes, and I asked the question. I said, you know, what is it to be a man? You know, it was just teenage boys at the time. And one of the leaders, who was in his 50s, says, oh, I've never asked myself that question. And I'm like, wow, amazing. We're in our 50s and we've not asked, what is it to be a man?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a powerful question, you know, and for me, I pondered on it and I've meditated on it. And you know, where I got to in it is there's two things for me, and everyone's journey is different, but for me, is to grow. It's like my responsibility as a man is to grow. Why? Because the more I learn and the more I grow, the better I can prepare the next man who's coming up behind me. And if every man took that pledge to do that in their life, we'd create a better generation of men coming up behind us. You know, so to grow is my first thing. And the second thing is to protect what's sacred. You know, you spoke about the warrior earlier. That's the job of the warrior. Protect what's sacred. What is sacred? The feminine. Let's look at Mother Earth. Let's just take that. What the fuck are we doing to Mother Earth? Why are we not protecting the most sacred thing, our own mother, Mother Earth? You know, and then expand it out to there, protecting the women in our community, giving them a voice, giving them a platform, you know, and not trying to dominate them. Going to them and saying, how can we be of service to you? We're not telling you how to do it. Just tell us how we can help.
Thank you. Makes me kind of remember, I think a teaching my wife once said is the Native American tribes, some of them used to have a council of grandmothers, and they would always go to them last, right? Is this the right thing for us to do? And that they would be the final decision.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, you know, look, they had it all figured out, in my opinion. You know, look at what we've done in the West. We've had men running the show for years. And where has it got us? Look at the world. We've messed it up. You know what? If I come into power, I'd go, I tell you what, all you men are sacked from every position of power. Let's hand it over to the women for 50 years. And let's really assess how are things improving. Because in my opinion, I think there'll be a lot more emphasis put on connection and protection of the sacred instead of wealth. And I think that's what we really need. You know, like all these corporations and people in power, it's all about wealth and exploitation of Mother Earth. You know, and I believe the feminine, they're connected to it. They're already connected. You know, it's all about cycles. We go around the moon in a cycle. Sorry, we go around the sun in a cycle. The moon, you know, these are cycles. Women have these cycles themselves every month, a natural menstrual cycle. You know, it's like when we go to workshops, we sit in a circle. That's a cycle. We go around, we take the men through a process. It's like the wheel. It's going from one place to another place. That's a cycle. It's a journey. You know, and I think men are really disconnected from that. You know, and even when you look back at Native American tradition, that's why the sweat lodge was created. You know, the Native Americans created the sweat lodge because they believed men are disconnected from the earth. So the sweat lodge represented the womb of Mother Earth, where they combined all the elements. So the men could literally be reborn every month, you know? So I think, like I've said this already before, is like what we're doing now we are literally going backwards. It's like re-indigenization of our people. It's like we're going back to the old ways. That's what we're doing. We're going back. It's like calling us. It's like we've gone forward. We've got all the technology, all this advancement. And at the same time, we look around going, crikey, why is everyone killing themselves? Why is the suicide rate so high? And it's like, oh, right, well, let's go back. Maybe we missed something. You know what I mean? It's like we've been on a journey and then you've got, oh, I forgot my passport or something. It's like, we've forgot an important thing somewhere. We need to go back. And that's what this is like, how do we go back to our ancient traditions and figure out what have we left out? And then when you arrive at that place, you realize, shit, we've left a lot out. We've left so much. There's so much we've left out. We need to grow. We need to learn. You know, and I see this as a time of great awakening. You know, the fact we're having this conversation, the fact there's organizations like mine, I see that like change is coming in a big way. And I think we all just need to get prepared for it. Yeah. You know, like we're seeing it already. It's already happened. Look at COVID. Most people working from home, massive commercial offices in London closing down, being turned into flats. Why? Because companies have realized, crikey, we made more money with everyone working at home because they had a better work-life balance. So why pay for rent on this massive office block in central London when, you know, we can save, you know, £250,000 a year and just have everyone working from home. So you see, like, it's happening already. This awakening is happening despite of yourself. So get on the bandwagon, get to work.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. As you're speaking there, when I worked in the city, it was almost like we were only interested in the next quarterly statement or the shareholders' profits. So it was like 3 months, anything further than that. And I love what they're trying to introduce more into businesses, this idea of the Native American, of the decision I make today, how will that impact the next 7 generations?
That's right.
And it's like, oh, actually, if I make that money, I might pollute all the rivers. Oh, okay. So that's going to, in fact, impact my children and their children. It's almost like because we've disconnected from our emotions, we can do this decision of just the next quarterly statement. But if we actually felt, what would that feel like?
And I'm a massive believer of that, Piers. You know, the 7 generations. You know, we haven't fully healed from World War II yet. We're halfway through that 7-year cycle. You know, we're not fully healed. You know, like we've got like, I think like 2nd, 3rd generation of parents now who grew up with parents who were, you know, on rations and running to bomb shelters. You know, like we haven't fully healed from that yet. You know, there was fathers coming home who'd seen all their friends blown to bits or killed, you know, and then coming home with PTSD at a time when no one even knew it was PTSD. You know, like, so the 7 generations is a thing. And you know, they go even further than that. I spent a lot of time training with the Blackfoot tribe that are based in Canada. And they believe in 7-year cycles in our lives as well. And that's been proven to be true in my life. You know, the first 7 years of me being sober, I went down a whole corporate route, set up a successful business in London, and then got to this point where I was sort of like crashed. I was like, crikey, this isn't really what I want to do. I don't feel any fulfillment in it. And then spent the next 7 years building what I've got now until I turned 14 years sober in December. And then this cycle stopped. And then it was like feeling this weight of like all these things that happened in the last year. Last year, a documentary film crew came and filmed one of our workshops, which looks like it's going to be commissioned by Netflix. TEDx reached out to me to do a TED talk. My publishers wanted me to write a 2nd book. The CRP project expanded. We got corporate sponsors. It was all the signs of like that 2nd 7-year cycle is coming to an end. And it's like, you need to prepare now for this next 7 years. So I'm in the first year of this next 7-year cycle. And the way my elder Rains Many Arrows explained it to me is like, there's literally a death. There's literally like that old Michael that served you for that 7-year cycle has to die. Like, you need to really get deep and go within, you know. And that's why I rocked up to the MKPI group in Bristol a couple of weeks ago, because I was like, you know, there's work for me now in this. I need to be growing. I need to be learning. I need to be expanding, you know, similar to how a great white shark keeps moving through the ocean. If a great white shark stops moving, it can't breathe. Like, it literally breathes by moving through the ocean. And I believe that that's us as well. Like, we have to keep moving forward. We have to keep growing and developing ourselves. So yeah, I mean, the teachings of the Native Americans are just, the more I learn about them, the more I'm just blown away. And you realize how little you know. The more you learn, you're like, crikey, there's so much layers to this. There's so many things they had figured out. So many sacred teachings, and then the sadness and guilt I feel that my ancestors went there and just smashed them to bits, you know. And it's like, we need to remember that. We need to remember what we done, that part of ourselves that was so hungry for power and wealth. And we need to be really consciously aware of that, because that will prevent it happening again. It's like what, you know, Carl Jung said, is like bringing that shadow into the light, you know, instead of like canceling people and judging them and criticizing them, you know, like bringing it into the light, you know, like talking about it, that we've all got this within us. This isn't exclusive to a certain group of people. We've all got the capacity. That's my phone ringing. We've all got the capacity to do these horrific things. Like, human beings, we have the capacity to do horrible things to each other. And I do too. And it's like, the more consciously aware we are of that part of ourselves, the less likely is that part of myself is going to take control. And that's what integrating the shadow is all about, in my opinion. That's what I think all of this work is about, is can I integrate all them parts of myself? You know, like when I spoke about SAS Who Dares Wins and the inflated warrior, you know, and being in communication with him. So there was a communication between him and my king. There was a conversation. So I haven't pushed him away into shadow. I haven't banished him and said, you're not welcome here. It's like, no, you're welcome. Thank you for protecting me all them years, actually. I'm going to give you a really comfy place to retire. And you're just going to sit here. And who knows, if someone comes to really hurt my family, I may have to call on you. But for now, I just want you to be on standby. And if the king needs you, he'll tell you. I think it's like, this is what this work is all about, being in conversation with them parts of ourselves, because we've all got it. You know, like when I speak to, I do a lot of work in Swaleside prison with the lifers there, men who are doing like, they'll never get out, right? They're doing like 2-3 life sentences, multiple murderers. And that's what they say, is like, I don't know what comes over me. I have a moment and I go into red mist and that person has to die. And it's like, yeah, he hasn't integrated that part of himself. It's like, let's get that part of yourself out. You know, where did that develop? Where did that first develop, that inflated warrior? When did he have to come out to protect you? And normally you trace it back and it always ends up in a traumatic childhood, these men. And that's the saddest thing, really, Piers, that I see in all of this in the world. Lots of the systems are flawed, but the saddest thing that I see across the world is that the most traumatized, neglected, and underprivileged members of our society all at some point in their life end up in the same place. And that place is prison. So if you ever want to meet the most traumatized, neglected, and underprivileged members of your society, just go to your local prison. That's where they all are. In 2022, right now, as we speak, what is our solution for the most traumatized, neglected, and underprivileged members of our society. I'll tell you, we lock them up for 23 hours a day. That's our solution for them. In the age of coronavirus, we lock them up for 23 and a half hours a day. They're only allowed out of their cell for half an hour to have a shower, and they're not allowed any visitors from the outside because of coronavirus. A lot of these people who we're locking up are 14-year-old boys and girls. Some of them are innocent of their crimes, but they can't get to court because there's a backlog because of people taking time off because of COVID. So this is how we treat the most traumatized, underprivileged, neglected members of our society in 2022 in the UK, which is meant to be one of the leading Western powers of the world. Yeah. Mahatma Gandhi, one of his most famous quotes was, "The greatness of a nation can be measured by how it treats its weakest members." Think about how we're treating our weakest members. How are we treating the most traumatized, neglected, and underprivileged members of our society? Not just here, but in America as well, and in other countries around the world. Norway, Scandinavian countries are the only ones that are doing it slightly differently. They've realized this isn't working, but we still haven't tweaked on yet.
Yeah. I did see some film about what they were doing in Denmark. I think they've got open prisons, something like that, and really beautiful spaces.
Yeah.
And I've never been into prison, and I've heard, that it's not a beautiful, loving space.
And that's it. That's what they're doing differently. They're giving them a nicer place to stay where they can come in and out, and they've got access to education, they've got access to exercise, they've got access to therapy. They're doing it really differently, and it's great. And I really honor them, the Scandinavian countries, for doing something differently. But there's even a missing piece there. Is we need this work to be taken into them. Make it easy for organizations like mine, the Band of Brothers, MKP, is make it easy for them to get in, and then pay the men for giving up their time and coming in. It's you know what I mean? You'll pay millions and millions on all these bullshit courses, right? That mean nothing. Why don't you cover the time for men to give up their time in the week, because they've got families and bills to pay, pay for them to come in and give this work to these men,
Yeah.
And I think the government don't want that, because the whole criminal justice system employs a lot of people, keeps a lot of people in jobs. You think if everyone got rehabilitated and the prisons were empty like that overnight, boom, millions of people be out of work. So it's not in their interest to rehabilitate everyone, until it gets to a tipping point where it's just way out of control, or the people revolt and say we're sick of crime. But we're not there yet. But I'll keep shining light on this matter. It's one of the things I'm going to talk about at TEDx. I'm doing a TEDx talk in April in Kingston, and that's one of the things I talk about. Is it ain't working. What we're doing ain't working. And it's I'm just going to shine a light on this, because the change won't come from government. I myself have spoken in the Houses of Parliament. I've gone to the Home Office. I've spoken in the Home Office. I've took it right to the top. I've had MPs tell me all the right things that they're going to do to change it. And as soon as you leave, nothing happens.
Yeah.
So you see, the system's broken.
The
The system is broken, and it needs completely taken down, dismantled, and rebuilt with something new.
How do we do that? I mean, because
we do that by having people like me at the table.
So
you see, when we come to these big decisions, people like me ain't even got a seat at the table.
Yeah.
So you think in Native American tradition, when they would have a peacekeeping circle, if two tribes were at war, or if there was a problem, they'd have a peacekeeping circle. They'd have a peacekeeping pipe, and they'd sit in circle, and they'd bring in people that were important to that conversation. What do we do now? These important issues, we've got people who've mostly been to boarding school, discussing issues that about people who've grown up on council estates in poverty.
Mm-hmm.
Why is there no one who's grown up in a council estate in poverty not at that discussion?
Yeah.
Someone like me should be at least sitting at the table.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's how we get around it, but
Mm-hmm.
they're not ready for that. When I go in there, they're not ready for my power and my intensity.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? They want someone who's been well educated, who can talk to them on their level. And it's like, no, that ain't working.
Yeah.
You need to hear it. You need to get to my level. You need to hear my experience.
Mm-hmm.
You want to understand this problem? Yeah, you need to adapt yourself to me, not me adapting myself to you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like the biggest dilemma is like they don't want people like me sitting around the table. They don't want people of color who are from the streets sitting there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a problem,
It's almost like the place where this men's work needs to go the most is into the Houses of Parliament.
Totally, mate.
It'd be lovely to do like a new warrior training, get Boris Johnson and all these other people on it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, because look,
that would be great.
It would, mate. It would, because look, they're just lost souls as well. They're just lost in a different way.
Yeah.
They're lucky they've had a little bit of privilege along the way. They've had a pretty decent, stable family and a bit of money in their bank account, but you're lost as well. There's no make no mistake about that. You ain't got that all figured out. That's really apparent when you look at like that police officer who murdered that girl and all the stuff that's been going on in the Houses of Parliament. It's like police officers, MPs, none of you got it figured out either.
Yeah.
So it's like you all need this work, and that's why conversations like this are so important from men of all different walks of life. Men who've been to boarding school, men who've been to prison, men who haven't done either of that and had a very sheltered, privileged life, but still found value in doing this work. That's what I believe is going to save this planet. Is men who've done their work, who are willing to step out of their comfort zone and have difficult conversations, and most importantly, let their light shine. And for the people out there who spend time on social media, trolling people, tearing people down, gossiping, judging, criticizing, I just want to say, fuck you. You're the reason why loads of people don't step up and let their fucking light shine. You're part of this problem. If there's a man or a woman out there trying to do something better, trying to make this world a better place, if you can't support him, don't try and tear him down. At the least, just don't try and tear him down. Just let them do their thing in making this world a better place. It really frustrates me because I know so many people who would love to have a podcast or make videos on social media, and they're terrified to do it because they know people will judge and criticize them. And they have the most powerful stories, like ridiculous. It's like, God, if the world heard your story, it'd be so powerful. And they're like, no, I'm too scared. I know everyone will judge me. And it's normally the ones that are closest to them that will judge them the most.
Yeah. I wrote a book, sent it to a publisher a few months ago, and my mother was like, "Oh, I'm not going to read your book." I'm like, "Yeah, that's fine, no problem. I don't want you to read it because it will upset you." And I remember when I first did my first video about boarding school, it's about 40-50 minutes long. I sat on it for 6 months. It was like, I just thought I'd get this huge backlash from boarders. I think I've just had one person in 6 years who's given me a lot of stick. But apart from that, there's been hundreds who said, "Oh, thank you so much for sharing." And I think, I see that.
It's the same for me as well, Piers. Like I haven't had much negative feedback either. But the fear of that definitely stopped me from stepping up. And it's like, it's good to hear you share that experience, and it's good for people to hear mine as well. They're like, I had loads of fear, but actually once I stepped up and let my light shine, there was very few people who had much to say about it. That's not to say that trolling and all that sort of stuff doesn't exist, because it does. But the people that do it, like I believe you're worse than journalists and corrupt politicians. but I'd invite you to not let that stop you,
Mm.
you know, because the odds are 95% of the feedback will be positive, and there'll be a lot of people impacted by your story.
Mm. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. So just kind of start to draw this to
Yeah, sure.
end. Is there anything? I mean, I've got lots of other questions. The importance of forgiveness or honesty, integrity. You kind of spoken about these a little bit as you've spoken. Is there some final bits that you would love to just share to people about your journey? And
Yeah, I think, you know, like, look, the CIP project, the letter CIP stand for change is possible, you know, and change is possible if you're willing to do the work. I think that's all I would want to leave with people, is that look at my life. I was a suicidal, convicted criminal, drug addict who wanted to die. And now I've got the life I've got today. I've got 3 kids, never seen me drink or use drugs. I've got a lovely wife, got a lovely home in Devon, 10 acres of land. I'm a best-selling author. All that stuff is important. But what's most important is that I'm happy with me, and I don't need alcohol and drugs or anyone else to tell me that. Like, I love me, you know, and that's what's most important. And it's like, look, I got here by working on myself, you know, not by pointing the finger and blaming others. I could have easily done that. I could have easily looked at my background and said, look what happened to me in my childhood. And that was a reason for me to stay the same. I could have easily done that, but I didn't. I looked in the mirror. I got accountable with myself. I looked within. I done the work. So change is possible, but you got to take the first step. You got to do the work, you know. So find the organizations and resources and people out there and reach out to them, you know, because your life, the life that you really want, is available if you're willing to do the work. And I think that's all. That would be my final thing I'd like to say to people: is change is possible, but it's in your hands, and you got to do the work.
Yeah. Thank you. Really inspiring. Thank you so much for your time today and sharing. And I'll put links in the description to get Michael's amazing book, Young Offender, and also to the CIP project. And I'll put in Mankind Project as well, and other links of Band Brothers, etc. Yeah, thank you so much. And I say this to most of my guests: if I can support you, Michael, in any way, please do reach out to me. You know, I really enjoyed. I shared before, I was kind of a little frightened before this podcast, but yeah, thank you for your amazing story.
Thank you, Piers. And likewise, I'll support anything that I can with what you're doing, mate. You know, I'm right there.
Thank you, brother.
Nice one.
Okay.
Blessings to you, brother.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.